Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Liam Suter. I am HR Grapevine's Deputy Head of Content. And right now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to this webinar, which, as you already know, is titled Simplify Your HR and Payroll to Empower Your Employees. And this is brought to you by our good friends at Zalaris. So, a little bit about today's session. Harmonising HR and payroll operations can be a daunting task, but issues such as fragmented systems, compliance requirements, and the pressure to scale efficiently can often make a unified solution feel out of reach. So in this session, we'll be exploring how leading organisations are overcoming these challenges to achieve greater efficiency, compliance, and employee empowerment through some modern self-service tools. You'll be gaining insights into how a centralised platform can streamline your HR and payroll processes, reducing complexity and improving that employee experience. There'll also be some practical advice and best practices for transforming fragmented systems into one simple, streamlined operation. And we'll be sharing some key steps in building an agile HR and payroll strategy that supports that compliance and satisfaction at scale. And this session will also feature a case study from KAEFER, showcasing how they have achieved that operational efficiency and enhanced employee engagement through digital HR transformation. Well, today I'm delighted to have with me Laura Bowes, who is the Director of People and Development at KAEFER UK and Ireland, and Stephen Burr, who is the EVP and Managing Director at Zalaris UK. I'll let them introduce themselves in more detail in just a moment, but before we go any further, just a little bit of housekeeping of how our webinars run if this is the first time that you're joining us. To the side of your screen there, you can see a Q&A box. You can pop questions or comments in there at any time during today's session if you've got anything that you would like to know from our speakers, and we'll aim to answer as many of those questions as we can towards the end of the session. And of course, this session is live on demand, but it can be watched back on repeat a little while after the live stream ends. You just follow the same link that you've used to get here right now, and you can go back over any points that you've missed or that you found particularly interesting. So enough from me for now then. Let's introduce you to the people in the know. Stephen, why don't we hand over to you first to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Zalaris, and then we'll ask Laura the same things too.
No problem. Thanks, Liam. So I'm Stephen Burr and I work for Zalaris, where our mission is really to simplify HR and payroll administration so that our customers are empowered with useful information to enable them to invest more time in their people. Hopefully it's as simple as that. We do this by utilising technology to offer both consulting and managed services across the HR and payroll sort of domains. The company was originally founded in Oslo in 2000, and the group now comprises about 1,200 people in 17 countries. Personally, I'm responsible for the UK and Ireland region, which means I get involved in all aspects of our business, and of which, of course, one of those key points is working with our customers, such as KAEFER. So that probably is a good point to introduce you, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Liam. It's great to be here representing KAEFER and talking all things people, payroll systems, and transformation. I'm Laura. I'm the People and Development Director at KAEFER, responsible for UK and Ireland. And I guess best place to start is who are KAEFER? So started over 100 years ago in Bremen, Germany, as a family-owned business, and continues to be headquartered there today. As a business, we've grown largely through acquisition to a global organisation reaching 33,000 colleagues operating across 33 different countries worldwide. Substantial growth over the last 4 years, predominantly through 50% private equity, and growing that business really from that 1.4 billion euros to exiting last year at 2.4 billion euros. So what's our purpose? Well, our mission is to be the most reliable and efficient provider of technical industrial services. And I guess everyone's thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, our services, we're a people business, and our core services are scaffolding, installation, and protective coatings to a majority of large-scale blue chip customers, and it goes across the globe and similar journey into the UK and Ireland. So if you could just bear with me a little bit to talk a little bit around UK and Ireland growth journey. Back in 2020, KAEFER UK and Ireland were around about an £80 million business. February 2020, KAEFER Group purchased Wood Group Industrial Services, which was a hive out from Wood Group. That meant quickly overnight, we grew from 1,000 colleagues in an £80 million business to 2,000 and a £200 million business. In that year, a new leadership team and a real strong ambition to grow the business, doubling the size. That last year we exited the business at £350 million revenue. And today we have a headcount really of over 3,200 directly employed colleagues.
Brilliant. Thanks for that introduction, Laura, and to Stephen as well. So before we get into the transformation that KAEFER has undergone, Laura, I think it might just be useful for us all to understand some of the complexities that come with operating HR and payroll in your organisation.
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors to consider. So if we start with our core skills being that what I've already mentioned, which is the scaffolding, insulation and painting, we do that over a diverse sector. We're geographically split from Aberdeen to Plymouth, west to northeast where I'm sat today, and across a number of sectors. So we're split in nuclear, defence, energy and industrial. We operate on large scale the power stations and things like that to residential as well. So real kind of diverse in our customer base. The reason I'm telling you that is that means that we actually have a lot of national and local collective bargaining arrangements, pay components that bring in complexities, employment contracts to pay schedules, pay elements. And the nature of our business is really project based. So we're constantly bidding and hopefully winning a lot of work. So 2P tends to be the norm for us and the norm for the people team. We've always got a 2P preferably in and sometimes out, which brings existing employment conditions, local collective bargaining arrangements. From a customer side, we operate 24-hour service, so we often have a variety of work schedules, night shift, back shift, offshore where we're working on offshore platforms. And on top of all of this complexity, we operate it on a weekly payroll. So 90% of our workforce is that weekly payroll. From a system side, I talked about that journey back in 2020 when we had two organisations coming together. We really had a system that wasn't built for growth, and that was really because we've moved from that small to medium-sized business to a large business really quickly. And whilst the nuances of the people and payroll is complex, colleague pay is really a baseline to get right. So from that basis, I don't think anything that anyone's listening has heard anything new there. Rapid growth, complex people and payroll arrangements, and systems that are not built for sustainability and scalability as well.
Absolutely. You talked a bit there about locations and delivering services to customers and all that complexity. Does that also mean that you have to collect time from some of your employees too to get that done?
Yes, absolutely. And time's really essential to us because time's money. So time recording in terms of billing to our customers, not just paying our colleagues correctly. Our largest cost base is our people, and it flows to our commercials, to our finance, to our customers. And on that basis, we're often audited by our customers as well. So it's really essential that we get the time right that flows through to pay. And ultimately, what that gives, because we're operating that weekly payroll, is insight into our revenue. So we can really use that as a key performance indicator against our budget. And I guess when we're talking about time, and I'll constantly talk about the weekly payroll, time's of the essence, because every week we're processing 3,000 colleagues, and we have to be efficient, and we have to have the stability in our processes, our systems, to ensure that it's correct.
Yeah, I think I can see some of the challenges there. They're clear that are coming through. So yeah, recently you've undergone this change in HR and payroll solutions. When you first set out on that journey, what was it that you were looking to achieve, and why was it? Talk us through some of the issues that were going on there.
Yeah, I think simply, and hopefully I've painted the picture to where we needed to get to, which is sustainability, scalability, assured governance and compliance. And as I'm saying it, maybe it's not that simple, but ultimately from a people and payroll foundational point, we needed that to be able to have a platform to grow. We didn't have that. As I said, we had a system that was really built for a small to medium sized business. So that became an emerging business risk. So there was also the element of we had to change to make sure that we had the platform for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've identified the problem, how do you then go about finding the right partner to work with to get that solved?
Well, I think right partner is always the objective decision, where you'll have your global IT UK exec team and the procurement process that follows. But again, you're talking about people's pay, which is sacred. And once you have all of, you've satisfied those core conditions, really you want to have a trusted partner that you're in it for the long haul with. And Zalaris provided this, and I think that's through the procurement process is where I first met you, Stephen.
Yeah, I think so. I think actually, as you say, you're a German headquartered company, and initially the contact came through some of my German colleagues, and we were sort of quickly introduced and became these complexities and some of the challenges were brought to life. And I think that's when I met Laura the first time. And as we say, through various sort of stakeholders and different levels of the parts of the organisation, whether it was IT, HR, payroll, multiple calls, demos, presentations, discussions. I think actually what happened there was we just learned more and more, and then we shaped both the scope and a couple of different approaches to rollout. So yeah, we probably spent a lot of time listening, revisited our approach in collaboration with KAEFER, taking into account just both their business needs and their technical considerations, because there's always something else going on in the business at the same time. But I think eventually we settled on a more balanced approach, and that included establishing that HR foundation first as a real building block for all the other things they had in mind to do. I was a steering committee member from early days, and I've been throughout the engagement with KAEFER through the multiple phases of go live, as we'll talk about HR recruiting, onboarding, and then the 4 different payrolls that they've done live as well. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey.
So obviously I'd love to hear from Laura what the business impact was, but before that, Stephen, perhaps you could give us an overview of the technology that was being used.
Yeah, of course, no problem. So the headline is we deployed cloud HR integrated to time and payroll. Sounds easy. Specifically for core HR, we deployed with KAEFER SAP SuccessFactors Employee Central. It's cloud-based, it's easy to use. For payroll and time, we utilizes Zalaris' People Hub solution, which again is the foundation of our SAP payroll at its heart. And we did that for weekly and monthly paid employees in both the UK and Ireland. In addition, there was a mass time entry solution, which we use for time and absence capture, that was developed and used in parts of the business. On top of that, they've deployed SuccessFactors recruiting and onboarding as well. Along the way, mainly to help the project and in parallel testing, we used a third-party tool called Spinifex IT's Easy Clone as well, which is a great tool for that use. And as you'd expect, a project of this nature had other things like reports and interfaces, internal and external interfaces to systems like finance, the HMRC, ROS in Ireland, and KAEFER's own project costing system, which they call Pegasus. So yeah, I think I've probably made that sound quite complicated, but if you put a few boxy diagrams together, it makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Stephen. So flipping the lid now to you, Laura, tell us a little bit about how KAEFER solved those challenges that you were having.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on solving them, Liam. I probably need a few more boxy diagrams as well, but we certainly found a few more along the way. I guess as many have experienced with any system transformation or change, we encountered our fair share of challenges. But I think before we go on, I think this is the perfect place to really acknowledge a huge thanks to the project team on both KAEFER, Zalaris, and everybody that's been involved, because we've now got completed our initial project of the HR and payroll system go live. That's a monthly payroll in both the UK and Ireland, and a weekly payroll of UK and Ireland as well. And that's been working alongside Zalaris. So I think a huge appreciation and thanks, because that's been a huge achievement. But it's been tough. And in places we've really had to stop, reset, and go again. And I think that's not a bad thing, in honesty. I think getting it right is the big thing, and the honesty of any change management is there's going to be a few missteps. And I guess whilst that sounds a little bit sobering, it's the reality. Hopefully, some people on the call will realise and recognise in transformation. But I think it's really what's next and what happens next after that reset that counts.
Yeah, it's interesting you've mentioned about resetting there, Laura. I'm curious to see what exactly you mean by that and what that reset involved.
Yeah, so we undertook, as I've just mentioned there, a pause and a reset Q4 last year. And I guess if I was to articulate it into three themes, it would be a team reset, a project scope reset, and a communication reset. So if I could talk through those, I think that would articulate it quite well. So from a team reset point of view, as we started this journey, we had the people team ultimately reporting into the HR function, the payroll team into finance. As we were learning through this journey, we really came to the conclusion in January that we needed to form the people and payroll services. Forming that team in January really got to the heart of our inefficiencies. As a people and payroll function, we removed instantly duplication. But what we also did was we enabled SAP to be that life cycle product. We focused on joined up messaging as a team first before going out to the business. What that got was a general cohesion between the team, but also it provided a credible and consistent experience going out to the colleagues. When I talk about, I guess, the project scope reset, what I mean by that is we focused on things that mattered the most, and we put all of our attention onto the most critical activity, which was the UK weekly payroll. We had to make a strategic decision on both sides between KAEFER and Zalaris to say, well, we have to remove our time and attendance module. That'll evolve over time, but we were doing too much. We were doing too much change to the business, to the project team, and we had a growing weekly payroll. We were a growing business, so the landscape was constantly evolving and changing. And ultimately, within all of this, pay accuracy was a non-negotiable, and ever so more in week one when you go live, because that gives so much in terms of confidence and credibility into the system. So the payroll system was the business critical, and it needed the attention of the business, the project team to deliver that. So that was the reset. And finally, it was around the communication and ownership reset. So at KAEFER, we have the value of team spirit, and I think nevermore was that deployed in the weeks leading up to go live. It may sound a little bit contradictory when we're talking about a digital system, but we have a workforce of offline employees. They don't have KAEFER email addresses. Because we're safety critical, their mobiles go in a locker. They're not allowed those on site. So when we're talking about communication, we can't just send things out there. So what we said was actually, this is people's pay. We left nothing to chance. We created booklets and we posted them out to 2,500 colleagues. We have people working away from home, so we made sure the people team, the site teams were making sure that they had access to this. And we ensured that from a people team, we were talking to all of our stakeholders, unions, user groups. And at a site level, we really recognised that people go to who they trust. So we were using a lot of peer-to-peer groups as well. That enabled us really to resolve issues early. And it was a really great coordinated effort between operations, finance, HR, payroll, and the communication team. And whilst we absolutely focused on data integrity, parallel runs, and everything that's really important into the lead up of Go Live, one of the success measures that we really focused on was logging into the system and colleagues' user access. And it was a great thing to watch in terms of the team spirit. And actually, in the days leading up to it, we had 93% login to the system. And what that really enabled us to do was manage operational risk. So a couple of minutes ago, I talked to you about time is money. And when we've not got people really accessing their pay slip, it affects productivity, which ultimately affects revenue, and it'll affect profitability as well. So giving colleagues the confidence that they can access their pay slip was a real success measure for us and enabled through the communication as well.
Great, thanks, Laura. Yeah, really interesting to hear the issues with, like, not issues, but the challenges around like offline employees as well in particular. So great to see how some of those issues were solved there. Stephen, I'd love to hear from Zalaris' perspective as well. Any challenges that came up along the way during this as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Laura's was pretty comprehensive, but there's probably a couple of other things I'd spot as well from my perspective. So one was, I mean, guess one happy challenge we had several team members across the KAEFER and Zalaris teams who actually had maternity leave and had babies. So that's but in a serious point there, it's highlighting a turnover of staff, whether it's a kind of a planned or unplanned, or you're making time for it, is when that impacts the business, it brings its own challenges, both in terms of knowledge transfer for the project, decisions that have been through business drivers, linked to the business drivers. And by documenting these well, which is helpful if it's planned and you know about it, such as a maternity leave, then transitions can happen. And I think actually the team then felt the benefit of those later. So those almost natural ways of life and slight disruptions from along the way actually benefits them in the longer run because they were well prepared. So aside from the expanding population the project contributed to, I think the biggest complication I saw for KAEFER was twofold. First, the importance of the time data, which Laura's already talked about, in that weekly payroll. So coming from KAEFER's people who are on the ground, geographically dispersed sites, weekly is a tight timeline. There's no time for mistakes, and yeah, that's an intentional pun. So secondly, I think working in an organization with those complex national and local agreements, the consequences of that mistake not only impacts individuals and reputationally, but can impact productivity, which in turn is costly financially for KAEFER, but also potentially reputationally with their customers as well, not just their employees, but with their customers as well. So, it's pretty key and imperative. And KAEFER had that legacy way of capturing time and payroll input, and adopting a significant system change proved quite a stumbling block or a slight barrier in some areas of their UK business. In the end, they prioritised managing the change, the importance of payroll, to achieve some of the other benefits, and provided a workaround for that sort of full-time solution. It was a pretty tough decision, I think, as a project team, when you've worked with that in mind as your objective and then you slightly change, it can be quite a hard communication to make. But the team on both sides sort of quickly adapted, got over it, and saw the benefit of reaching the finish line to get all the benefits of that was originally set out to do. So ultimately, getting payroll live was key in that next step in KAEFER's journey.
That's great, thanks, Stephen. Laura, you were mentioning earlier that you've got both weekly and monthly payrolls.
Yeah.
So obviously, not only do you have a large proportion of weekly workers, but there's obviously much tighter deadlines when it comes to weekly payroll, and it's constantly spinning plates more so than monthly. So tell me what that was, what it was like with the go live at that moment when you're having to juggle weekly payroll.
Yeah, well, any go live is intense, but layer on top of weekly payroll, absolutely. But I guess we were ready. So with any large change, there's always going to be trepidation and anticipation and nervousness. But we'd had successful parallel runs. We had 93% login consistently, now have 96%. We had a dedicated team on both sides that had done the hours. They came in on the weekends prior. All the prep had been done. We checked the data, we checked it again, and we checked it again. So everything was in place, and it was really about the cutover. And it was successful. And what does that mean, really? Well, all payments were done on time, and have been ever since. We had no exceptions, no subs in that week. And it's the biggest testament, really, is we had that legacy system, and once that's really been turned off, the new systems become the new norm, and we've never looked back since.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, great to hear that any sort of worries beforehand seems to be ironed out before it even went live. So yeah, great to hear. And yeah, so practically as well, what was achieved, and then what impact did it have? That's maybe a question for both of you there. I don't know if maybe Stephen, you want to come in first on that one?
Yeah, well, I can give the facts, I guess, and maybe Laura can give the business interpretation. But yeah, so in the core HR, KAEFER managed to migrate all their data into the new SuccessFactors system for maintaining HR data within 9 months and go live. So this really started to install some discipline into the HR team for data management, and the fact that HR data was going to drive all the other bits of functionality becoming live, all the payrolls predominantly. For Ireland, payrolls KAEFER deployed both a new payroll integrated to both at the core HR and to a new time solution to enable that capturing of time bookings across both their weekly and monthly staff. And they operate that payroll in-house with their own payroll team. So once the UK payrolls were also live, it meant KAEFER were able to decommission their legacy systems and really feel the benefit of having those joined up systems. So maybe I've told you what happened. Maybe Laura, you can tell us a bit more about what you've seen has been the impact of those system changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our efficiencies have really been since go live and since January informing that people and payroll services. So we've been more data led. We've been really strict with our timescales. What we can see now is we can anticipate and see errors and mistakes early. In doing that, we can correct them before the payroll's running. And we really have that data integrity piece. We've removed a lot in terms of duplication and from a central team. So therefore, what we're getting is a better colleague experience and a consistent service. We will continually evolve that. What's great to see is I keep talking about the 93%, 96% login. We didn't have that before. So what we've got is colleagues taking ownership of their pay, and it's building confidence, and it's bridging that gap to be set for people to say, right, if something's not right, we then have the people team with wage clinics. It's much more of a collaborative experience, particularly when we do have a weekly payroll. It might not necessarily be payrolls is correct, but sometimes the time and the information coming in, because we've just got such a tight deadline, we can really correct all of that. And I think we're at the start of our journey with all of it, but we've seen a huge reduction in our manual processing, and it's a really exciting time across the HR, operation, payroll team, and everybody else to say, how can we start to automate things to really focus on business impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've heard there some of the things the positives that have come out of it and the uptake and things. Were there any benefits or positives that you maybe weren't expecting or hadn't anticipated that had come forward from this?
I think we've always wanted to be more data-led, and I think one of the huge impacts is around the reporting and the insights that we're getting. And I think it's great that what we're seeing is the team really taking ownership of that and driving that. And I think whilst that was definitely an expected outcome, the ownership of that has been great that they've run with that. I've talked around the login rates, but one of the big things that we've really focused on is because we have that transient workforce and offline employees, we're really trying to think about how can we connect with each other and making sure that they've got information up to date. So one of the things that we've used the system for is use our KAEFER connection, which is our employee newsfeed, and using the system to try and keep people up to date with information. So it's been a real way to stay connected and something that we keep trialing and improving on. So it's really important for us culturally to make sure that we have that.
Fantastic. Thanks for that insight, Laura. And so question for you now, Stephen, to a little bit more about Zalaris. So you're obviously deploying HR and payroll tech with a variety of clients. Talk me through some of your observations on this transformation project.
Yeah, certainly. So I've certainly seen the journey that KAEFER have gone on. I think it really fits into the category of transformation. In one way, I'm describing it as quite a technology change. I've talked a lot about systems and stuff, but you've heard from Laura that KAEFER really reorganized their HR and payroll teams. They've managed change in their operations, connected with their diverse employee base in a different way, realign the expectations of different people in the organization, whether it be the site administrators, their managers, or employees and colleagues across the business. So it's quite a significant change that's been really kick-started by the technology in some ways. So another observation I would say is their committed, dedicated workforce, and for that I'm very thankful, and we particularly Laura's also recognised that today. That definitely the project was demanding at times, but that commitment led to our joint success really, and that's massively appreciated. It was also clear that KAEFER realised that go live isn't actually the end of the journey, and that there is still lots of opportunity for them to achieve more benefits from the organisation and the systems and processes they now have. But I think it's also important to recognise where where you've got to on that journey and what you've achieved along the way. I guess sort of stop and smell the roses a little bit. So I'd say that was an interesting observation. And then finally, maybe I'd say that the collaboration and trust benefited all of us involved. You know, open lines of communication and working as one team with the right people in place. That project team gained momentum. And it was really obvious that even under-resourcing one area of the project slows the whole project down. You know, so that's really important to understand that critical path. But yeah, massive well done, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and great to hear how you've managed to spin all those plates and keep the balance, and sort of seeing that collaboration come through, as you were just saying then, Stephen. So Laura, from your perspective, what key bits of advice would you have to other organisations who might be looking to go through a similar process that KAEFER has gone through?
Yeah, I think it's probably best to build on what Stephen's just talked about there, and we've taken so many learnings from it. But if I could articulate in a few points, is I think one of my biggest learnings is we've got to stop talking about people systems as a HR and payroll activity. The system's an enabler, and it's a company system. No one person owns it. I think we are the custodian and we have the privilege of doing so. But people systems cut across the whole business, whether it's affecting operational delivery, finance, commercial, and in some cases in KAEFER, we've safety. So we are a safety critical workforce. So the whole business should be evolved. Whether that is collective ownership, clear accountabilities, it's really critical to make sure that you focus on building the system with everybody involved that needs to be, and really keeping at the heart of organisational context as well. I think next one would be know what your success measures are. And I guess a spoiler alert is it's not a time scale. And whether that is a recruitment system, an employee central, payroll, the right success measure is definitely not a deadline. Understand what you're trying to achieve, put milestones in and build from there. And in a weekly payroll go live, it's pay right first time. It's so credible. It carries so much weight and it's so important. I think for me, think long term. It's evolution. This has been really a mantra for us over the last year, really, and why I mentioned initial project delivery so far. I think sometimes you can feel that the finish line's moving, and I guess another spoiler alert is there isn't a finish line. It's a mirage. We'll always evolve, whether that is advances in AI, digitalization, legislation changes, or actually the organisation says they want to go in a different direction. We might acquire a business, take more large businesses in, or contracts. It constantly changes and the system will constantly evolve with it. What true success to me really is looking to where you've started and where you are now. And I've not met an organisation that does this perfectly, but I think really making sure that you don't lose sight of your achievements, the benefit realisation. And I think, like we mentioned around the how you can quite quickly forget about a legacy system, you can quite quickly forget about your inefficient processes and ultimately how that impacts in terms of the time and costs saved. And I think final point for me is, from a personal note, is don't be afraid of tough conversations. Listen to your people, whether that is the wider business and your colleague experience, the project team, leadership. They'll know if it's not heading in the right direction. And I guess from my point, be honest, having the tough conversation. It's called tough conversations for a reason. And don't be afraid to change the direction if it's needed. Stephen, hopefully you'll agree with those points as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that reset was hard, but I think ultimately it proved that trigger to move confidently to go live, you know, which is what we all wanted. And part of this process of even talking today, it's valuable to look back and reflect. You know, experience is the best teacher, I believe is the saying. So I think a couple of other observations. I think we saw through the project the importance of maintaining that decision log, that auditability of decisions. You know, as you move between stages of the project, it becomes even more important if you have changes in the project team, you know, because often that history is in their head. So Another one, I guess, not a new one really, is clear ownership of those business deliverables, who's responsible, and making sure you empower them so they have the capacity to action in a timely fashion. But obviously you need to ratify those decisions with stakeholders, particularly in the early stages of projects before you get too embedded in working along a certain path, and it's harder to flex. So a bit of that is the right balance between centralized control and local needs, and that was quite prevalent in KAEFER's case, where the operational sites up and down the country, or in Ireland too, they have some local agreements. The contracts will be slightly different depending on the type of site and businesses they're working with as customers. So you have to have that flexibility to meet the business reality that they're working in. You can't impose your way of working on some of these situations. So that business reality, but trying to do that within the boundaries of achieving some economies from standardization, and obviously having a governance around it, really, because that's fundamentally important in the corporate world. Next one, I guess, for me, I jotted down in my notes, was data quality, aligning that data model, bringing it together. As Laura mentioned, there was a major acquisition just before we got involved with speaking to KAEFER UK. So I think they've had various TUPE as well. So you're taking on different data sources, ways of working through those acquisitions. So don't underestimate the effort involved and obviously the importance of this data. Similarly, don't underestimate the change management throughout. You can't just action it at the end of the project, and when it's done well, it works really well. I mean, I just think it's brilliant, that idea that they're now connecting with this dispersed workforce who they really had no connection with digitally, but through enabling communicating payslips to them, they're now actually communicating through that connection as well, and that's just brilliant. What an added plus that is. But ultimately, I think what achieved success with this project we've touched on, but to summarize, is probably that motivation, dedication of the project team, the mutual trust, and the recognition, and maybe the word is bravery to adjust direction when required. I think it does take a little bit of bravery to kind of say, look, we need to take a breath and move forward, because it feels like you're stopping, but ultimately becoming quicker.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Stephen. And so how has it been since this has gone live with KAEFER?
I think, thankfully, it's been quiet, which is good. And as Laura said, they've been pay every time, so that's great. But I think for them, practically KAEFER and for the Zalaris team, obviously there's a shift in roles and responsibilities. Your project team are we go through a period we call hypercare, and then the project team are sort of handing over into our BAU teams. And likewise, Laura's team are getting used to what that BAU looks like, and maybe not having the comfort of the project team around them all the time. And KAEFER still utilise Zalaris for their SLA support, so in managing those systems going forward. So they've got that comfort at least. Alongside that, I think we're starting to again look forward, and we're working with KAEFER on their roadmap and refinements to help continually improve some of those processes. Now they're in practical use day to day. What bits can be done a little bit quicker, and some of those things might be more significant, like integration to workforce management systems, further payroll refinements in support automation, or even enhancing SuccessFactors functionality with, say, document management or something like that. So there's lots of possibility, and it's just a case, I think, of prioritizing it to give the most benefit to KAEFER. And I think sensibly KAEFER are taking a bit of time to embed, reflect, and then plan for that future going forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. So Laura, tell me what's next on the digital transformation journey. What are the next steps coming up?
I kind of invited that question for you, Laura, didn't I? My statement was.
Summed it up quite well, actually. And so next question. No, I think from my point, we've been really strict on the lessons learned, because we really want to continually build and make this really successful. And it's really exciting, because we're just at that start of the journey, and we've really focused on that over the last 3 months. This included, I guess, going out to our stakeholders. So we've went out and had surveys with Zalaris, all employees, user groups, and we've had playbacks of that. So we've really had a lot of information and data from our people to say, well, what do we need to do to improve and create that governance framework. we're at the start of the journey of this life cycle product. We are getting used to it as well. But what we're really looking for is that working in partnership with Zalaris to what does that roadmap look like. And we've got some key themes that we really want to focus on, which is, efficiency. So we do want to always try and be digital first where we need to be, really improving that colleague experience. One that's really close to my heart really is proving business impact and cost savings. So whether it's digital first processes, how are we lowering operational costs and really creating that value add? And I think really we need to make sure that I think sometimes we're a little bit cautious to put pounds, shillings and pence onto that, but it's absolutely okay. I go back to scalability and sustainability, so that always should be there. And finally, as a team, just being really comfortable in being data-led. So we're really getting into the heart of our meetings, really making sure that we're using the data that's coming out of the system to really inform our decisions as well. So it's a really exciting time, and I'm really proud of where we've come from.
Right, still fantastic to hear. Thanks, Laura. And Stephen, over to you. Is there any sort of final thoughts or statements that you'd talk about in this journey with KAEFER?
Yeah, maybe I think in summary, maybe you're hearing, I think through both of us, a project that's had to deal with some change of direction as well as along the way. And it's important to go on that journey with someone you can trust. But maybe what isn't obvious in that statement is it is as important to us to trust the client as is for them to trust us. There's obviously a lot of talk about trusting your partner, but I think it's also, you have to have trust in your client. It works both ways. So we had that with KAEFER, and that I'm very grateful for. But within that and building that trust is give and take, and there's a lot of doing what you say, and recognizing that project teams are full of human beings at the end of the day. Respecting that and working for the overall benefit of the team is as important as getting the job done. So I think I can't really thank Laura enough for coming on today. It's testament to the relationship. She's kind enough to spare her time to discuss the project, and there's no better endorsement really than hearing a customer's story, and even if that's warts and all. So thank you for giving up your time and sharing some of the insight.
Great, thanks, Stephen. And yeah, Laura, over to you. Any sort of final closing thoughts on this journey?
Yeah, I think, well, thank you, Liam. Thank you, Stephen. I really enjoyed the last 40 minutes talking through it. And I guess for final closing thoughts, a lot of this is around people and payroll transformation. So transformation doesn't end at go live, it begins. And if there's one message that I would share, it's be bold enough to pause, honest enough to admit missteps because there will be them, and committed enough to build with your people.
Nice.
Well, yep, Stephen and Laura, thanks so much for talking us through this transformation journey. We've got some time now at the end for any questions that the audience might want to hear answers to. So if anyone does want to address any of the points we raised, just pop them in that Q&A box and we can get to them. In the meantime, while we're waiting for some to come through, I'll ask a couple of follow-up questions that I was keen to hear responses on, if that's okay. So Laura, one for you first, if that's all right. With so many frontline and offline workers that you have, I think we talked about some of the challenges that you were facing there. What are some of the things that you've learned about reaching them effectively when it comes to communications on HR and payroll, particularly when you've got those and people who do have access to phones and emails all the time as well? Are there any sort of challenges that you would give advice on there?
I think one of the things is don't assume how people want to be communicated with, and whether you use technology as an enabler to do that. Just go and ask them. So I was on one of the sites a month ago now, and they said actually for some certain things we just really want to have it given to us, or having face-to-face. So sometimes the art of actually doing that is sometimes lost. So one of the biggest things I would say is, particularly when we've got such a geographically spread workforce, we might have some that have 500 on a site and some that are 2 colleagues in a van traveling around and going back to a depot. What we need to try and get to is that personalization as much as we can through scalability as well.
We often see, it's a significant challenge for customers who have this type of workforce. We often go to see them and we go, it's great, we can do these digital systems, you can have employees can access this and that, and they sort of say, well, they haven't got a digital ID, they haven't got a corporate ID, how would they authenticate their organization? That can be quite a significant barrier, so there's probably there are some solutions around it, but it can be quite just purely that can be a costly exercise for a business. Giving 3,000 people a digital ID, that's whether it's a Microsoft Azure ID or another, that comes with a cost, and that's quite a significant decision for an organization. So thinking of different ways.
That's certainly a conversation that we'd had as well, is what's the value of doing that, particularly when we have, as I said, people that are putting their phones in the lockers and they don't need the email address. They will never use a KAEFER email address. So what is the value to that from a business point of view? Because it is profit impacting, and finding creative solutions to communicate in a cost efficient way.
Thanks both. And I suppose another challenge that's almost similar is the need to balance the need for rapid transformation while also keeping all your employees engaged and supported during all that change. Do you find that there was a similar approach there?
Yeah, I think people, we often say in our team now, slow down to speed up. So when we're going out to talk to our colleagues, I think it's going out with purpose and telling them at the right time. So I think we tried different methods over the period of our phases here, in terms of how are we communicating at the right level. But I think it's about telling them what they need to know at the right time, and that's dependent on your own organisational context. For us, like I said, was a big part of it for us was how to access pay slips and how do we deliver that. And actually, it was to get the booklet and sometimes have just wage clinics and making sure people felt comfortable more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that the right time is a key phrase in that, and doing the right message at the right time. And it's not, and there's definitely a need in change management. I see this in our organisation when we bring in change and at different levels. Is the messaging is not only repeated, but it's a common theme, but a different message, a different level of detail as you go through. So you have to first almost put the idea out there. Something's happening. We are going to do this. Then you refine it down until probably the last message is here's how you access your payslip. Very detailed instruction, but you can't go to here's how you access your payslip without some kind of thread of reasoning of what's going on and why we're doing this and why it's important to KAEFER and what the values are it enhances. So that change management, as I say, you can't do it just at the end by going, here's a booklet that says press these 3 buttons and your payslip appears. That's not change management. That's just, So it's thinking about a message and giving the right message at the right time and building on the message and understanding that you will have to repeat it, because if you're a part of the project team and you've been doing this for several months to get this system live, yes, you understand it because it's what you're doing every day. Whereas these people on the site who are maybe, as Laura says, scaffolding or something, that's not what they're doing every day. In fact, they're not even maybe picking up their digital device every day. So that's not, accessing a system. So being able to just repeat it, say it in different ways, provide the detail, provide the support. I love the idea of the wage clinics as well. That really fits with KAEFER's business as well, of quite sites and contracts, that team unity, having that wage clinic support locally where it's needed. That's kind of exactly fits, and that wouldn't be the same solution for another business, but it's perfect for KAEFER's business.
Fantastic. Thanks both for that one. And obviously we heard a little earlier in the session about the resets that you have to go through during some of the projects like this. Is there any advice you would give to change management leaders or HR leaders who have to go through maybe one or even more resets and they might feel that they're sort of failing at something in the middle of a transformation? Any advice that you might give them to help them get over those hurdles?
Don't be afraid.
Yeah, I think fear is born from because you care that you want to do the right thing. as well. And I think with that reset, sometimes that carries with it a little bit of emotional weight, because you have got project teams on both sides that are absolutely dedicated, working towards that finish line. And I think we've talked about there isn't a finish line, but it's about being able to articulate why you're doing that. And that's about everybody coming and working in the same direction with a purpose. And if that purpose isn't the right direction for the business, or it's not going to get to the right end result, it's really articulating why you have to stop and reset. So do I have any advice? I can't allay anyone's fears, because when you're talking about a reset, it certainly does come with it a level of nervousness. But I think I just go back to if you're talking about a reset, the likelihood is you know why you need to stop, and just say that, and come with it the reasons why.
I think I'll see if Laura agrees with this. My observation is, prior to sort of when you sort of took that pause and reset, was a kind of feeling of whether the confidence was building or the confidence was eroding slightly in the direction. And once that reset happened, it felt like everyone felt confident that we were, the new timeline, the few months ahead, were now going to be completely exactly as we all laid out. And I think that sort of became apparent. It felt like everyone then started to move in one direction with confidence. I don't know if am I summarizing that correctly? Do you feel?
Yeah, I certainly, we took time in the reset to make sure once you go again, you don't really get then another reset.
Yes, maybe that was it.
Definitely had the confidence, and we took the time to build. And I think everything that it articulated in terms of the team reset, the project scope reset, huge learnings around for me was the minimal viable product. And actually you can't do everything all at once, because it is that evolution. So I think sometimes going back, my advice would always be going back to those points. And when you're talking about reset, it is that tough conversation. And as leaders, we probably have them more often than we realise.
Brilliant. Thanks both for that answers. Stephen, I was wondering if there's anything that you've learned from working with KAEFER on this that you might be carrying forward to other projects and other transformations at all?
Oh, hopefully something, I'm sure. But I think again, I think it was just really setting the foundation and building the relationships at the right level in KAEFER, so we were able to work closely together over the time that we did. So that was sort of fundamentally important. I actually live about an hour or so away from where KAEFER are based, so trying to make sure I appeared at times, and that the project teams and key things happened on site together, and that we spent some time together was particularly useful as well. So I think just we live in quite a digital world. We're now talking over a Zoom webinar, but understanding that face-to-face time and just spending a little bit of time together is actually still hugely valuable. So don't underestimate that either.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing we've talked about a lot in the past 50 minutes or so is about trust and communications on these things. So what sort of practical steps could you recommend, if any, to take and build and maintain that trust with clients, particularly when it comes to, long and challenging transformations that you might have to go through?
Yeah, so we always use a collaborative project area. So we've got the project team on all sides have got access to the same documentations, the governance structure. They can see the status of things all at the same time. We now actually, even since we started working with KAEFER, improved our internal systems in some of those areas around how we deliver our consulting projects as well. So, and to give much clearer and much more dashboard view of these sort of things and statuses. So I think that's important in terms of working together. And I've now forgotten what the second half of your question was.
It was just to do with the trust and
the trust. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and I think I think in that is being clear with the status was to make sure you're giving visibility of it. We had roughly monthly steering committee meetings, making sure that status represented all key, the project managers on both sides view of that project, and that we were clearly articulating that to the stakeholders and flagging risks or issues as they were. Because a risk, I don't think a risk should be seen as a bad thing to admit. I think not identifying or flagging a risk is worse than flagging it. The best thing you can do is flag it, and then people can make decisions on whether they want to try to mitigate it, whether they see it as impactful, likely, and you just assess the risk from that and decide whether you're really going to invest time in mitigating or accepting it and acknowledging it, that it's a risk. And I think that's important. But if you kind of try to suppress certain information like that in a steering committee meeting, then the stakeholders then start to lose trust in you. So it's always important to get the project team reporting clearly, accurately, and openly, and so that we can help mitigate any risks if there are any occurring.
Yeah, those big transformations can be overwhelming, can't they, with all of the software and technology involved. So yeah, the human element has to just be constantly integrated throughout, I suppose, doesn't it? Wonderful. Oh, sorry, go on.
I think just building on that, from my point, I think from a trust point of view is using the system as an enabler as well. So understanding the organisational context and being honest on both parties that we can adapt and build. And I think that's really important because each different partner, from Zalaris's point, I think KAEFER, we bring our own complexities in ourselves, and just making sure that we can manage in terms of identifying bespoke risks and impacts and everything else in between.
Thanks very much, Laura and Stephen, for your answers on that one. Time for maybe just one more question. That I'll put this one to you both, really, because we've heard so much from both sides of the perspective on how this transformation project went. But if you had to sort of sum up, is there anything in particular from both sides that surprised you most about each other's involvement during this partnership?
That's a dangerous question.
Nice, easy one to end on there.
Yeah. I don't know if it surprised me, and maybe it became quickly apparent, was just the sort of the size and importance of that weekly workforce in the business, and the complexity that it came with. KAEFER are working they're working a bit like us, mainly for other organisations trying to win projects and contracts, and those customers they're dealing with are quite different, from sort of big dockyards to industrial sites, and they come with their own complexity, and some of those complexities come into HR and payroll as well, in terms of those collective and local agreements. And I think it was, when we first met, you kind of think KAEFER is one thing, and then I suddenly started to realise actually it's 50 or 60 things, and KAEFER were trying to make that not standardised, but make a bit of normality about the complexity in their business. And so it was, as I said, sort of trying to balance that central governance framework standardisation with the local operational business, which is where the revenue and their business is sustained from.
Yeah, I think from my point, it's we went into this as a long-term partnership and a trusted partner and extension, Stephen, of the people and payroll team. But I think, and with that creates, I think one of the biggest learnings is to take time to understand those complexities, because you can't standardize everything because we are so diverse, but the system being that enabler and working in partnership to make sure that it becomes that success to ultimately keep going back to your core objectives, which is to build for sustainability, scalability, and overall compliance and assurance, because that's a non-negotiable as well.
Brilliant. Thanks both. Very well handled with that left field question at the end there. So thanks very much. So we have just about a minute to go, so that's probably a good place for us to start drawing things to a close here, I think. So all there is left for me to do then is to say thank you to both Laura and Stephen for your time and your expertise today. And a huge thank you to everyone watching as well there. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days to be here and get involved with the webinar. Do check out the link to Zalaris at the bottom of the page that you're watching on now. And yeah, we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much for joining us.